What is the scariest nightmare that you had? A voice told me I would never wake up again. I woke up and jumped out of bed, forgot about it, but things started to feel out of place. Then I woke up again. Things seemed normal and I carried on with my day, or so I thought. I woke up. This happened 7 or 8 times until finally I was actually awake. This was several months ago, or maybe last night. This happened to me. I kept waking up to a new reality and kept figuring out it wasn't reality. In my dream I actually had to go back to bed to go to sleep to wake up. Each time I woke up I felt like it was over. I can tell if I'm dreaming, but in these dreams it felt like real life, just out of step after a while. In one I woke up in a drug den on a junkie mattress with people I lived with convincing me I was a junkie, but didn't know it, because I was high so much, and couldn't trust my reality. Terrifying. I once had a nightmare a couple of nights, after moving into a new place, that I woke up in the middle of the night to someone breaking into the place and rummaging around. I remember being really scared and acting like I was sleeping, but I accidentally moved my leg and made a little bit of noise and the person walked over to me. I tried acting like I was sleeping still, and I remember getting shot in the head. I remember feeling a sudden pressure on my skull as soon as I heard the gunshot and an immediate feeling of numbness along with a ringing sound. I sometimes wonder if I really died that night and this is all just an illusion of some type. It scares the shit out of me thinking about it. I remember getting shot in the head in a dream. I was running from a gunman who took an argument we had to seriously. I turned a corner and turned around to see him pointing his gun. I saw him point it at me and heard the shot. The weird part is how my brain interpreted death. You'll remember pulling an N64 cart out while the game was on. The screen would distort and you would get that weird screeching sound. That's what happened, why I got shot in my dream. Then I woke up in a violent cold sweat. So this is from a few months ago. It started with a guy, clothed in rain clothing, dark blue plastic full jacket and pants with reflective stripes. He was washing my window, but not really. In fact he was inspecting my room. After that he was done he hid just out of sight, with the intent of murdering me in my sleep at night. He choked me with a metal cord. Honestly it was so real I could feel the cord pressing my jugulars closed in intricate detail. His attempt failed, because at the last moment I threw myself with him at a wall. Later I was in a police office that resembled my little brother's room. The desk was placed in the opposite corner that it is normally in and there was a policewoman. I remember her to be black and kinda chubby, and she was listening to my story. Suddenly while telling I started daydreaming. It was like the woman was talking about a band of faceless men. They would come at daytime, hover around you, and it would turn dark. And they would steal your face. And then it turned dark and suddenly the policewoman, the only one I trusted there, was gone and the faceless men were there, as I had awoken from my daydream. Then out of shock I woke up for real. To come to mind. 1. I was being shot in the head but survived. The doctors told me that they could not remove the bullet and that I would be mentally disabled for the rest of my life. I could feel getting dumber, losing the ability to speak or think straight. 2. Zombie apocalypse. Me and my family had to run from the zombies. I fell behind but somehow survived. My family continued running because they thought I was dead. I lived in some ruins for 2 years like a caveman. Then they came back and found me. I still have memories from these 2 years in my head, and they haunt me as if they were real. I was around 6 or 7 years old when I had a recurring dream where I was alone in an underground car park. It was dark and misty, and I was always in my pajamas. I went to bed that night, frozen in place, barefoot. A dark figure would emerge slowly from the mist. It was never in a hurry because I was stuck. It was super tall with long arms and sharp fingernails that it would drag along the concrete. Its mouth was so crowded with sharp teeth it couldn't close it fully. Every single time it would get to me and dig its fingernails into my sides, and then I'd wake up. To this day I still loathe being tickled, and I have a great fear of things poking between my ribs. I had a reoccurring nightmare as a kid that I was being chased through a dark multi-story car park by a pack of hyenas. Then at some point, I'm suddenly sat in a high back chair in the dark and the hyenas jump over from behind it, and at that point I wake up. No longer have it anymore, but used to have it a lot. Growing up I used to have this recurring dream where I would wake up in my bed and walk towards the door of my room. I'd walk down the stairs and towards the back of the house where the office was, and just before I got to the office I'd stop, turn around and sprint back towards the stairs, run up them, and then dive around the right corner at the top into my parents' doorway. But then something would grab my legs and pull me back down the stairs, and then I'd wake up. After the 15th time of having this dream I just started diving headfirst off the top of the stairs after waking up in the dream, so I would wake up for real immediately. I love Harry Potter, so naturally I wanted to see the movies when they came out. I had plans to see the second Fantastic Beasts movie when I was pregnant with my son, but he surprised us by coming a bit early. I got to see it 1 week after he was born. To those who have not seen the movie and do not want spoilers, stop reading. In the movie, there are 2 tragic scenes involving a baby and a toddler. The baby drowning scene got to me a lot. For months afterwards I had a nightmare that my son was in the water, floating towards the bottom, reaching for me, and I couldn't get to him. No matter how hard I swam, he just floated further down. I would wake up screaming. I have had night paralysis, night terrors, everything before, and I would take it all over that nightmare. It was a nightmare I had years ago. I was walking by an elementary school that's near my house and there were black clouds billowing from all the windows. There were a bunch of what looked like WW1 era soldiers in gas masks plastering posters to the walls of the building that had the biohazard symbol on them and quarantined written under it. Then I started to hear and feel a rumbling off in the distance. It was getting louder, stronger, closer, and it was doing it quickly. I ducked behind a car, and that's about the time I woke up. Never saw what was responsible for the rumbling. I just got the sense from the dream that I knew that by the time you heard it, whatever it was already too late. When I was very young I had a terrifying, but in retrospect, super funny dream. It all occurred after catching snippets of the original Grudge movie from underneath the blanket I was hiding under while my mother watched it. In this dream, I awoke in a Japanese-style paper house, and it was extraordinarily dim. No light shone through the thin walls, and I remember feeling very on edge. After some exploring in this house, an entity began to manifest in the corner of one of the rooms, exactly like how the Grudge manifests in the movie in this grotesque tangle of black hair. Scared as hell, I turned around the corner and bolted, only to come to a sudden dead end. Puzzlingly, the same entrance I had just come through. Now here is where it gets weird. I hear the awful croaking noise the Grudge makes, and I hear it rounding the same corner I just fled from. I'm getting ready to kiss my ass goodbye as I stare in horror. I quickly turned around, and much to my horror and surprise, it had manifested in front of me. Except this time, it was Michael Jackson, post-vitiligo. Maybe this dream occurred around Jackson's death, which could be why he appeared in the dream. And maybe his pale skin and black hair subconsciously reminded me of the Grudge. Either way I woke up crying and screaming. Now it's just a funny story I tell my friends lol. So this was a recurring dream when I was like 8 years old. I was at school at dismissal time and they were loading up the buses. When I got on my bus I was attacked by some kind of octopus thingy on the floor of the bus. I stomped it to death and ran off the bus, bumped into a friend, babysitter, and ended up walking home with her. When I get home all of the doors are locked except for the basement bulkhead doors. I figure it's weird for my mom to not be home when I get home from school, but that's the only way in. I open the bulkhead doors and walk part way down the stairs when I see some kind of lady monster demon thing with a giant head and rows of sharp teeth, and she's eating my little brother. I'm a protective older brother. I immediately flip into rage mode and grab a rope that's hanging from the ceiling apparently, and Tarzan swings down to her to avenge my brother. She snatched me right out of the air mid-swing and pinned me down. She then tells me how tasty my little brother was and how she's going to eat me too, only she can't decide where to start. She decides to start with the lungs. Then I woke up. I was born with asthma, so I think that's where the lungs thing comes from. Anyway, I had that nightmare consistently for about a year, and then it stopped. I had a dream that I was sitting by the shores of a lake with a bunch of kids. Eventually Jesus came and started preaching to us. After he did, he began to walk away, and as he did, I walked after him as I wanted to talk with him personally. I called his name a couple of times, but he ignored me. But then eventually he turned his head back at me and said, "I want nothing to do with you," and continued on until he disappeared. All the trees with it, and died, and I was just in a state of shock, fear, and despair. When I woke up, I was terrified. The thing that scares me the most was how realistic everything looked and felt. The exact location that was in this dream was a place I'm very familiar with and dream about very often, and I have never ever have had it look or feel this realistic before. The emotions were raw as possible too. The experience was so awful and it hurts to remember what this dream led me to a very dark place, as it only heightened the severe anxiety I was feeling before that to levels that were unimaginably terrible. I ended up having a psychotic disorder that lasted for the better part of a year, and I still am directly affected today. The Inception kind of dream, 3 levels deep. I think I slowly became more aware each time though, and that was the issue. LVL1, nothing fancy. I died somehow, which was upsetting, but I woke up. LVL2, I was somewhere like a beach I was waking up on and thought, oh good, was only a dream. Then almost immediately the moon or sun or a comet, something from the sky, came crashing toward the earth and I knew we were all gonna die. But then I woke up. LVL3, I just was awake in the middle of a Wilco. I told the guy selling cameras about my dreams and he started laughing at me, and I lost my mind and killed him. Then someone else who came over to see what happened, and another, and soon I'd killed many people, but I kept wondering when I'd wake up next, and getting more worried I wasn't in a dream with everyone. When I finally really woke up, I was terrified. I'd only been asleep like an hour maximum and the dream felt like a lifetime and so real. And I was horrified how my mind could invent such horrible things. And I was scared if I told anyone I might lose my mind and get violent, and like I have trouble killing spiders. And yep, got up for work at 2 AM. 2 nights ago I had one where my dad was dying, and he crumpled onto the floor and kept saying he wasn't able to breathe and was panicking, and I was just trying to tell him it would be okay and trying to calm him down. But I knew in the dream he was going to die, and I'm about to start crying recounting it now. I've had so many nightmares recently, but that one was so vivid, and I've been feeling overwhelmingly stressed and anxious the last 2 days because of it. My parents are getting older, and losing them is the thing that scares me most in the world. I don't know what I'd do. I don't get any nightmares anymore, only lucid dreams, but like when I was 6 I was extremely fucking terrified of the annoying orange, and in a nightmare it was all of my friends and family at the big play place we would go to if one of the kids had a birthday, but this time the roof was ripped off to reveal a gigantic annoying orange. I'm not even fucking with you at all. He then started eating people, starting with the parents, because they were more ripe, so all of the kids including me ducked into the play place expecting safety, but instead annoying orange picked up the play place and started to eat it, and then I woke up. Other than sleep paralysis, I have one dream I remember vividly. For some reason I was sleeping in my parents' bed rather than my own. I remember walking through the house. All the lights were off but everyone was awake and getting ready. It was pitch black in the house. I walked through the kitchen and down the steps by my room and went out the back door by my room. As soon as I opened it there was a bright flash and there were aliens standing there. Yup, the typical looking ones. They grabbed me and I screamed. Except I actually screamed out loud and scared the shit out of my parents. I never told them what the dream was about. I also watched Friday the 13th and was terrified to fall asleep. I would drag my mattress into my parents' bedroom and sleep on the floor. I had some super fucked up and terrifying dreams as a kid. This is copied from an earlier post. Still the only nightmare I've ever had. I was in a campground at night, standing with a bear and looking at a tent that a guy was sleeping in. The bear would eat something off the picnic table in the campsite and say, "When I eat this thing, he dreams about blank." And whatever the guy dreamed about would become real and fly out of the tent. The bear did this for a few items and finally said, "And when I eat this one, He dreams about German world info. Then a tiny red flying saucer came out of the tent, shot me, and I flew 100 feet or so into the forest. I started walking, and then a voiceover where I was narrating myself said, "And that was the night I met the fiend." I looked at some bushes right near me, and saw 2 large furry pointed grey ears sticking out of it. For whatever reason, they scared the hell out of me, and I was able to recognize it was a dream and wake myself up. I was in this MMA style ring, a demon was in the corner, and weapons were scattered across my side of the ring. A door would open and a group that would be extra immoral to kill would come out. First it was animals, and I slaughtered them, then it was elderly folks, followed by children, then lastly it was friends and family. I got down to where I had one friend left. I didn't want to kill them, but for some reason thought I had to carry out these murders to save myself. Right before I stabbed the friend, she looked at me and said, "You know you didn't have to do this, right? He didn't command you to kill. It was a test or something along those lines." I broke down and sobbed in the middle of all the bodies around me. Then I woke up. I dreamed that I was in a classroom with classmates I don't recognize, and everyone was pulling out their math homework assignment to turn in, followed by an immediate impromptu non-multiple choice final exam. Panic ensues and I would open my eyes with sweat down my back, looking around my bedroom to remind myself I'm approaching my mid-30s and I'm no longer taking math classes. I would close my eyes, but still have that miserable feeling of anxiety as I close my eyes and try to think happy thoughts. During my 20s I would have this nightmare once every few years. My wife jokes I have fish memory, and I admit I rarely would remember nightmares or dreams. But the math class nightmare, I don't forget. Every hour I get a new one. But one I found most repulsive was some weird black giant humanoids with multiple arms killing my parents, my cousins and then my best friend with my hands. All of them breathing my name in the last moments. Then they proceeded to rape the dead bodies and me. It felt terribly real. Warm blood in my hands and arms. Only people who are my family, ending in such a manner. My parents shed tears, but smiled at me as they fell, while I had my hands in their punctured lungs. My cousins caressing my head or shoulder, and dying saying they love me as I had their ribs crackling under my hands. My best friend gave me a bloodied and warm hug and kiss before saying that she loves me, and crying as she falls, while I'm crushing her heart with my hand. The rape part was so real that I felt pain all over my body and bottom for minutes after waking up. Phantom pain sort of stuff probably, but I have grown terrifyingly afraid and defensive over them. But I love them more than anything. The clowns that came into my bedroom, and one day as a black silhouette with a fedora and the other came over and stuck his hand through the bars on my crib and held my hand while he smiled from ear to ear. I stopped sucking on my pacifier and played dead until I woke up from a lack of air. I had that nightmare many times as a toddler. I knew that if I moved they would eat me. I was about 3 years old when I had those dreams. I had one dream where I had regenerative abilities, but not at a pace of Wolverine. It's like getting a broken hand, and it heals within 2 days type pace. So in this dream, I'm constantly being hunted and injured. The worst part is it all felt very real. I can feel them catching me, ripping my limbs slowly pulling all my organs out. Even saw my own family trying to kill me. It was terrible. The dream felt like it lasted forever. I even convinced myself this is reality. It's not a dream. The final part of the dream is the worst. Every part of my body was gone, missing, and others were chasing me. I even died and somehow came back to life because of my ability. Then I woke up to my entire body feeling sore. Just last night actually. I was at work and a guy just randomly burst in and shot everyone. I remember thinking, so this is it. This is how I'm going to die, as I laid on the floor. Some guy is just going to decide to end my life. I wasn't shot, but all my co-workers were, and I had to try to revive one. I was holding his head and begging him to keep looking in my eyes and not die, and he just kept kinda nodding in and out. He lived, and I went to look for my boss, who was obviously dead. I think I'll hug all my coworkers when I see them next. I never really realized how much they actually mean to me. This isn't the scariest, however it's one that comes to mind. I was in my dad's street and I wandered off and found a hillbilly family who chased me. I ran back home While it seemed I wasn't even moving, I eventually got home and talked to my dad. He told me we were safe and told me to talk to my grandma who was smoking in the kitchen. I can't remember what we talked about, but I left and immediately heard a scream and saw my grandma missing. I talked to my dad, and while talking I looked in the living room and saw one of the family members with a goat's head on his head and running at me. At this point I woke up. I often have apocalyptic dreams, but this one was like a bloody novel. I once had one where I was in this horrendous fantasy demonic-like setup, where people were born with natural powers of flight or super strength or other sorts of power. The dictator that was enslaving everyone was keeping us all in a sort of war camp where they tortured and experimented on us until we became these sort of super weapons. I remember going through the whole process of planning an elaborate escape to get people out, which progressed to an all-out war. I fully remember the pain of having to leave loved ones behind, knowing they were being tortured. I've never woken up feeling more exhausted from a dream. When I was around 7 or 8 years old, I had a dream that a tornado went through my family home. Tornadoes aren't at all common here. A total of 1 tornado has hit my hometown in my lifetime. But this was after I'd watched a bit of a documentary about tornadoes on TV. I don't remember much about it, given that it was over 20 years ago. I vaguely remember watching it destroy memorable landmarks in the town, but I'll never forget the end. My family was surveying the wreck of our home, looking for my missing older brother. Then we found him. Well, at least we found his face, skinned off his skull, like that picture of Kathy Griffin holding up Donald Trump's face. At least he's getting some sleep now, my mother in my dream said, before the rest of my family laughed. As did I, but I had a sort of Kevin moment from Home Alone 2. That's when I woke up